case that's been taking wartime London by storm is finally coming to its conclusion. The court waits in silent anticipation as the jury's decision is read out. Guilty. Helen Duncan is found guilty under Section 4 of the Witchcraft Act of 1735, an act that hasn't been used to convict someone in over a century. This decision will lead to songs, statues, and radio plays being made about Helen, and award her the dubious title of the Last Witch, despite the fact that the act she was charged under convicted her not of being a witch, but rather a fraud. This is the story of Helen Duncan, the Last Witch. Helen Duncan was born Victoria Helen McFarlane in Perthshire on November 25, 1897, and from a young age made a habit of alarming her fellow students with her prophecies. Hey Timmy, what? If you don't give me your ice cream, you're going to explode. Nice try, I'm not just going to give you my ice cream. After leaving school, she worked at Dundee Royal Infirmary, and in 1916, she married Henry Duncan, who supported her paranormal abilities. They went on to have 6 children together, and in 1926, Henry is said to have encouraged her to start holding seances to help ease the financial stress of supporting their family. She claimed to be able to make recently deceased people materialize as ectoplasm. Okay, so ectoplasm is meant to be the physical form of spiritual energy. It's pretty much just the goo you see in movies. In Duncan's case, she would produce ectoplasm from her mouth or nose, which would then take the form, generally, of the deceased person that you wanted to get in contact with. This form not only allowed you to talk to them, but also touch them. In 1928, the first investigation of Helen was conducted. It wasn't by police or private detectives, but rather by a photographer, Harvey Metcalf. During the seance, he took several flash photographs and made some unsurprising discoveries. Duncan's supposed materializations were nothing more than a papier-mâché mask and a sheet used to make a crude doll. In 1931, the London Spiritual Alliance inspected Duncan's methods. They found that the ectoplasm Duncan would produce was nothing more than cheesecloth, paper mixed with egg whites, or toilet paper. To make sure she wasn't just swallowing this beforehand and regurgitating it, they convinced her to swallow a tablet of blue dye that would stain the ectoplasm if that is indeed what she was doing. However, for some reason in that seance, she strangely didn't produce any ectoplasm. So the LSA concluded that, yeah, she's totally just swallowing cloth and regurgitating it. That same year, Harry Price began investigating Duncan. Price was an interesting figure. He was a magician and psychic researcher who investigated so-called mediums, and often debunked them. However, unlike other debunkers, like his friend Harry Houdini, Price did endorse several mediums that he believed to be legitimate. Price had first become interested in Duncan when he got a sample of her ectoplasm from an early seance. This ectoplasm took the form of a hand. However, he was disappointed to find that the ectoplasm was nothing more than cloth and paper, and the hand was a maid's rubber glove. To continue his investigation, he paid Duncan £50 to have a number of seances. After one of these, he wanted to take an X-ray of Duncan to test his theory that she was just swallowing and regurgitating cloth and paper, and it didn't go well. Upon seeing the X-ray, Duncan freaked out. When her husband tried to reassure her that the X-ray was harmless, she punched him in the face and made a break for it. On her way, she took a swing at Dr. Brown, a psychologist who'd been asked to come along by Price, but he managed to dodge the blow. Duncan then ran out onto the street, grabbed the railing, and started screaming. Her husband tried to pacify her. It was useless. I leave the reader to visualize the scene. A 17-stone woman, clad in black satin tights, locked on the railings, screaming at the top of her voice. A crowd collected, and the police arrived. The doctors were able to explain the situation to the police, and convinced them that Duncan didn't need a hospital. They also finally managed to coax her inside when this happened. Okay, I'm ready, X-ray me. What? What the hell was that? You freak out, and now you're all okay to be X-rayed. What changed? Wait a second. You, turn out your pockets. No. Can we search you? No. So she totally just handed you the cloth in the street. What? No. Oh, yeah, she totally... Fine, let's take the X-ray. To no one's surprise, the X-ray turned up clear of any cloth up the nose or in the mouth. But Price went on to write, there is no question that his wife had passed him the cheesecloth in the street. Price concluded his investigation by saying, could anything be more infantile than a group of grown men wasting time, money, and energy on the antics of a fat female crook? Following Price's report, Duncan's former maid admitted to having helped Duncan perform her tricks, and Henry Duncan admitted that the ectoplasm was a trick of regurgitation. In 1933, while performing a seance in Edinburgh, an audience member lunged at what was meant to be the figure of a little girl named Peggy. However, when the lights were turned on, it was revealed to be nothing more than a vest. The police were called and Duncan was charged £10 and convicted of fraudulent mediumship. In 1941, Duncan held a seance in Portsmouth, where she claimed a drowned sailor told her that the HMS Barham had been sunk. The ship had indeed been torpedoed off the coast of Egypt, but had not been announced to the public in an attempt to keep morale up. Due to this, the Navy began to take interest in her activities. On the 14th of January 1942, 2 Navy lieutenants attended one of Duncan's seances. "Ooh, I am your dead aunt, Mr. Worth. I'm here to convey a message." I don't have any aunts, and I never have. "Ah, did I say aunt? I meant I am your sister, and I am here to—" "My sister is alive and well. I saw her this evening." I am your mother and—" Okay, I'm out. That's enough. Lieutenant Worth was not impressed with what he saw and reported Duncan to the police. 5 days later, on the 19th of January, 2 undercover policemen arrested Duncan during one of her seances, as she was attempting to pass herself off as a spirit, which was just her, draped in a white sheet. Now, many of her followers have pointed to this arrest as proof of her abilities, and have said that people were worried that she would predict the upcoming D-Day landings. Others have said that the Navy may have believed that she'd gotten the information from the Germans and was working as a German spy, which is why they pushed so hard for her conviction. So which was it? How did she know about the HMS Barham? Well, it was probably neither. As researcher Graham Donald wrote, the loss of the HMS Barham was indeed kept quiet for a while, but letters of condolence were sent out to the families of the 861 dead, asking them to keep it a secret until the official announcement. So, allowing for perhaps 10 people in each family, there were about 9,000 people who knew of the sinking. If each one of them told another person, there were 20,000, and so on. Hardly a closely guarded secret. In short, news of the sinking spread like wildfire, and Duncan simply picked up on the gossip and decided to turn it into profit. However, the general mood of suspicion and the feeling that she was taking advantage of grieving families wishing to make contact with their lost sons and brothers accounts for the unexpectedly tough prosecution. In 1944, she was found guilty of contravening the Witchcraft Act, which made it illegal to claim that you or someone else had magical abilities, and she spent 9 months in Holloway Prison. When Churchill heard of the trial, he called it obsolete tomfoolery and saw the whole thing as a waste of the court's time. In 1945, the Witchcraft Act was revoked and the Fraudulent Medium Act took its place, a direct result of Duncan's trial. In this way, being the last charge under the Witchcraft Act, she gained her title, the Last Witch. Upon her release, she promised not to continue with her medium practices, but in 1956, she was arrested during another seance. She died at her home in Edinburgh a short time later, with some spiritualists claiming that the force of her reabsorbing the ectoplasm when the police raided her seance killed her. However, it is far more likely that her long history of poor health and obesity were far more responsible for her death than the police. After her death, Duncan was widely regarded as a fraudulent medium. However, she does have some die-hard defenders. Attempts have been made for a posthumous pardon in 2001, 2008, and 2012, all of which have been rejected by the Scottish Parliament. In 2007, the band Seventh Son released the song The Last Witch in England about Duncan's trial and death. In 2010, her trial was made into a radio play and released on BBC Radio 4. So, there it is. The story either about a spiritual medium who was harassed to death by the police, or a fraudster taking advantage of post-war grief and the desire to connect with lost loved ones. That's the story of Helen Duncan, the Last Witch.